One of the things that we're going to talk about today, or I guess the main thing of today, is we're creating truth concept standards. So it's a new thing. You know, one of the things that's out there in the marketplace, and we can understand why consumers can't do financial math, right? Not everybody has access to a financial calculator. But it is kind of weird that in the financial industry, people can't do financial math. And so we have people doing all kinds of crazy things out there in the financial environment as a whole. And some half truths, partial truths. I think a half truth's not really a truth, is it? It's halfway. I don't know. But and so in light of that, we've created some standards that are kind of a basis of what we hope that you guys will agree with as we go forward. So does that kind of make sense? Anything you'd add to that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously I know what the presentation is. I don't want to spill the beans, especially now that you've given that visual. No, I'd say that there's a lot of stuff that we figure out in life. Like you figure out relationships, you figure out how to play sports, you figure out eating, health, and you do it because I mean, there's certain principles, but there's a lot of flexibility. But I think when it comes to math and finance, I don't think that flexibility exists. You can essentially evaluate everything. So sometimes it's hard where people in most aspects of their lives are, they have that give and take and flexibility. But with this, it's either true or it's not. It can't be both, right? And so I think, as we get into these standards, I think that's where you're starting from, is that foundation of, okay, what is the foundation of every financial claim, financial products, financial strategy? You can essentially boil it down to those first principles or standards and be able to evaluate from the bottom.
Yeah, and I think what you brought up was kind of an interesting point too, because it doesn't mean that you do what the math says necessarily, right? But it's your guideline of, okay, if I don't do this, it's going to cost me X because I need to do something else because of, where I am in my particular situation in life,
Yep.
right? So there's times when I don't want to say violate the math. It's that we use that as a guide to see what it's going to cost us not to do it because something else is more important.
For
Does
sure.
that make sense?
Yeah, and that's where I think there's two perspectives, right? You have the perspective of an advisor, and then you have the perspective of like a human being,
Right.
right? Because yeah, an advisor, I would say, is there to show like here's reason, this is the rational way of looking at it. Whether they do it or not is up to them, given these certain circumstances. But in the end, I think an advisor, what they communicate to a client, should be based in first principles.
Right. And it's that idea of the math and the real world, right?
Yep.
And those two have to come together. And we've said it before in truth training. It's like if everything boiled down to what the computer can do, then what good are you as an advisor? What is your purpose? And it's to translate between the math and the person's actual situation and how that fits, right?
Well put.
or bring into alignment.
Right. And it's something that can a computer do that? A lot of times we're talking about, oh, the robo advisor is going to get rid of advisors. Well, not good advisors, right? Not the advisors that are actually doing the work between that idea of math and where the client is in their world. Okay.
Communication, relationship, all those things.
Right. Okay.
Okay.
Next.
I
So we're going to get into principles. Yes.
yeah, standards.
Standards.
Yes.
Standards.
Yes. Standards. And it's interesting. I numbered. No. What do you call it?
Lettered.
So I lettered the
Kind
standards
of like high
instead of-
school, you letter in
Yeah,
football.
kind of like that. No, because everything else is in numbers, and so to keep the confusion down, wait, what's the fourth principle? Is it no? We did A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah.
Well, we definitely didn't want to communicate that there were different things than the 12 principles of prosperity economics that many of you have been exposed to.
Mhm.
And there's a lot of you that have a 5-step process or, a 3-step whatever. And so we wanted to make sure that these were different and identified as such so that they could fit in with the work that you're already doing. So the whole goal is to help you help your clients.
Yep.
Cool. Okay, let's see what A is.
So I need, there we go, to have a screen share.
Nice.
Okay. Use financial math formulas and calculators, not simple grade school math, which ignores
So we're having
It's
a
time.
cable issue that we thought we had fixed before we started. So you'll get your screen share, and Todd, why don't you repeat that?
Yeah. So the first one, A, is use financial math formulas and calculators, not simple grade school math, which ignores time. And we see this all the time. Why do we see this? Because who carries around a financial calculator in their pocket? I mean, I do because I have it on my phone. But I mean, for the most part, I think advisors probably should, but certainly consumers don't, right? I mean, how do they have access to that? They don't know anything more than just adding stuff up. And so that becomes a bit of an issue. And it's totally different. An old example that I like to use, Michael, you'll certainly know this, and Jeff probably too, maybe. But Kim,
Yes.
let's say you have 3 oranges, and I give you 2. How many do you have?
5.
Okay, pretty easy, straightforward, grade school math, right? The question is, how many do you have in 30 years?
Well, they're probably all rotten by now.
Maybe, but maybe we stored some, maybe we dried them, right?
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah,
Could,
yeah.
Can you dry an orange? I mean, you can't
Sure.
apricot and stuff. I guess you can have dried oranges. I don't know. But some of them, think about it. One could have rolled off the counter and sprouted in the backyard somewhere, right? And grew, and we have more.
True.
Right.
We have a whole tree. Very
Okay.
possible.
And so when we start to talk about time, we add that element of time. We can't use simple grade school math of addition, subtraction, multiplication on
I
that
don't know.
single plane. It becomes a new dimension when we add time. And the only way to figure that out is with a financial calculator, because time actually causes exponential changes rather than just linear changes. And so, the follow-up question is money more like math or more like oranges? Right? And really, it's more like oranges because we have erosion from with money from inflation. We have exchanges where maybe we exchange it for something better, a better return, a better anything else, right? So in that process, we have to take that time into consideration, and the only way to do that is with a financial calculator. And so many times in the financial industry, what we're seeing is people are trying to use, again, a regular handheld addition, subtraction, multiplication calculator to convey information to a client, and it just won't work when we're talking about money and time. Unless it's just one day, right? Or even 1 year, maybe. Okay? That makes sense? Everybody
Yep.
agree with that? Okay, cool.
So the
thoughts
first
on
one was
that?
use financial math formulas and calculators. What was the rest of that?
Instead of grade school math.
I've even gotten to the point where I have a regular calculator on my desk,
It's working.
and mostly for the Zoom meetings, right?
He says it's working.
And then I'll have the Truth Concepts meetings on the screen, and I'll show the regular calculator and say, not this, this. And as you guys know, anybody can go and get the Truth Concepts financial calculators off the web. Any client can go download the 30-day free trial. They can have the obviously full software suite, which they're probably not going to use, but they can have those financial calculators. And I do have a few very analytical, heavy, technologically oriented clients that will actually download the software. I'll send them their TC data file. They'll play with it. It's usually pretty short lived, but again, the removal of that wall, I think, is so valuable because it lets them know that this is independent. It's not company specific. It's product agnostic. I can play with it myself. They're not pulling anything from behind the screen, any of those issues that people can tend to have. So just a thought.
And a great quote, Kim, that would go with this first standard. And that is, it's better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war. You ever heard that before?
I haven't. I like that.
That is good.
Well, it's the idea that it's better to be trained and ready for the challenge,
Right.
even if that challenge never occurs, than to be unprepared when it does.
I like that.
Yeah, and that's what I see from this first standard.
Yep.
Thank you. Yep.
I mean,
really
this
good.
A standard, sorry.
This A standard. Thank you. Well, the B standard is
So they don't have it on screen,
right,
but you
but
all,
I can
you all
say
go on. Yeah,
so.
yeah.
B, we'll come back to it where you can see them all once
Beautiful.
we get it straightened out. But B is always compare strategies using equivalent cash flows. And that seems kind of weird, but that is one of the big places where we see misinformation in the financial industry. It's like, oh, if you do this strategy that I'm talking about, you're going to have a whole lot more money. Okay, well, we have twice as much money, but look, we put 3 times as much money in it. Is that a valid comparison? Right? The cash flows have to be the same between the analysis that we're doing, going in and out to get to whatever goal it is when we future, whether it's paying down debt, which is a big one where there's a lot of miscommunication on the equivalent cash flows. Many times the debt pay down strategies require more money, and they're comparing that against putting less money in another one. Well, that's not a valid comparison. And so, this is a big part of the standards is having equivalent cash flows when we're making comparisons between results of one direction or one strategy versus another.
For an example, think about when we do the mortgage work on loan analysis and how in any scientific experiment, it is uber critical that you only change one variable at a time. So when we first teach this, we look at the only variable being different is either 180 months or 360 months. We use the same interest rates. We use all, the payment is different, obviously, but everything else is the same. And if you are challenged by the loan analysis work, remember that there's a macro there. When I get into the calculators, I can show it to you. But if you go up to the gear and the gear on the right-hand side, there's a macro. So I know for me, I could never really do the loan analysis unless I have my notes in front of me, which is why I wrote the Busting the Interest Rate Lies book so that I wouldn't have to do the loan analysis. But now we have the macro, so it's really easy to step through. But again, it just changes only one variable at a time. After you've worked through it, now you can go back and say, well, a 15-year mortgage would actually have a slightly lower interest rate and make some adjustments. But it's a scientific experiment, which means only one variable gets changed at the time, and that equivalent cash flow. So that kind of begs a question. Help us understand with the loan analysis, the 180 and the 360 cause a different payment.
They do, and we'll get into that on future things. We can have different payments if we understand the opportunity of each decision. And what we typically do, and that's why we do it in the mortgage analysis, is come back and put the same amount of money in both sides and see where we are.
Okay, that makes sense. Cool.
Okay.
You want to go on?
Yep. And this is what we're talking about. Measure both opportunity cost, what you give up, and the opportunity gain, what you earn, using a reasonable net cost of money. And so this is where the disconnect is many times, and that's what we see in the mortgage calculation and in a lot of other things. Everybody's familiar with, oh, I could earn X. We're going to compound that out into the future, and they use compounding or opportunity to look at what that would grow to in the future. But when we talk about costs, many times it's just added up over the time frame without the opportunity on that. Well, we can't have opportunity on our growth and ignore the opportunity loss on the other. And what we hear many times is the idea of opportunity cost. And I think a lot of times because it's framed that way, people really think that it's some phantom number, right? It didn't really happen, and so it's kind of a made up number. No, it's very real when we understand the perspective of it. And so what I like to use is it's just opportunity. It's either positive opportunity or negative opportunity, right? That's the difference between opportunity gain and opportunity cost, is positive or negative. And so when we look, and that's why I really like an IRR calculation, an internal rate of return calculation, because it automatically calculates opportunity in there on the cost, right? It's part of the calculation. We put in this much cost and it finds out an interest rate that based on those costs is the same equivalent for the ups and the downs all the way through. And so it automatically does it. But when we do that separately, that's where we often see some disconnect. And actually let's look at that with the accumulation calculator quickly. Okay, so if we put in, because I'm going to use this number later, let's use 40 years and $100,000. And let's look at a high yield savings account at 5%. And we see that grows to $703,999 over that 40-year time frame. Now, let's add some taxes in there.
Okay.
So if we go down to click on taxes,
Yep.
and then under taxes, let's turn off the tax table and just put a fixed 30% in there.
Okay.
And when we turn on the include button for that,
Which is
upper left of that box,
got
of
it.
that tax box.
Okay. Yep.
All right, now we see that dropped from that $703,000 number to $395,000. So over that time frame, wait a second, how much we pay in taxes? So if we click the annual taxes column on there that's showing up in red, we only paid $126,000. So turn off the include button again. And wait a second, $703,000 without taxes. If we turn on the taxes, it drops to $395,000. How did we lose over $300,000 and we only paid $126,000 in tax? Because internally, when it comes out of the account, when it's netted out of the account, it stops earning for the rest of the time frame. That's the built-in opportunity. The difference between $126,000 and the $300,000 that we lost was opportunity cost, automatically built in. So what we've heard happens, what we've heard, the solution for that is, well, don't take taxes out of the account. Okay, if we turn off the net box up there in the tax box,
Top right.
top right, and we stop netting,
Gotcha.
now we get the $703,000. It's interesting. Our taxes went up to $181,000 as far as cumulative. Why would that happen? Because since the account was able to grow to be bigger, did it throw off a higher tax revenue?
Yes.
Yeah. So it's 181,000. But wait a second. If we look at our rate of return, so the little dial there in the middle of the top of the screen there, we see that the average yield is 5. Well, wait, if I get to my 703,000, why is my actual yield still 3.5? It's because this calculator understands opportunity and it's built in to make that difference. So if I get to $703,000, but I funneled an additional $181,000 from another account, my return is the same as if I'd taken it out of the account. So the difference here is I have more money because I spent more money before. So turn off the include for just a minute. Let me ask you a question. All right. How much money do I have invested here of my money?
670,475.
No. How much did I invest? The 100,000 up front,
100,000.
right?
Yep.
Okay. If I turn on the include button, but net it out of the account, so net it, yep, and then turn the include on to have the taxes in there, how much money do I have invested in this transaction?
100,000.
Still 100,000, right? Thank you, Michael. All right, now turn off the net. How much money do I have in this transaction?
Still 281,200.
Yep.
Yeah,
Good
over
job,
the time
Paul.
frame. Thanks, Paul. 281,200. This is a whole different amount of money invested here, right? Because here I've got the 100 plus I'm taking money either from another account or from my income or somewhere else to funnel the taxes, and there's an opportunity for that. Just like we can't have opportunity gain and not have opportunity loss when it goes the other way, when we have negative opportunity or cost. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And yet what we see often is people saying, oh, this is a whole lot better transaction right here because we end up with $703,000. Well, yeah, but we spent more money to get it. Or we took $300,000, not 181, but 300 from another account when we understand opportunity. And we can add that here. And this is kind of an interesting piece. So
Hey, hold before you go on. Michael, you had your microphone off for a minute.
Thank you, Kim. I was just going to say I've looked at a few premium financing cases that were already in force a few years. And what they weren't taking into account was the amount of interest coming out of their pocket to pay towards the loan to service that premium finance.
Yeah. Certainly an issue, or can be. Okay, so let's go up now. And on this same one, what I want to do is let's put in a 3.5% cost of money rate. If this account is what we're doing, what our net opportunity cost should be the same as net on our, highest and best use account. So put 3.5 there.
Here?
On the cost of money rate. No, cost of money rate down a little bit. Oh, just down and to the right, just a hair. Keep going to the right. Down now.
Oh, sorry. I'm
Yep.
sorry, right there. 3.5?
Right. And now what we see is when we do that, see that lost opportunity cost column came on? Or an option to turn it on? Sorry. It's red up there beside taxes in the buttons. Yep. And then the tax and LOC as well. Okay, so now what we see is here we've got $181,000 of actual dollars paid on taxes, $137,000 in tax for a total of $318. Well, guess what? Our account went up by $318,000 because we spent $318,000 more.
Mm-hmm.
It's not an improvement when we understand the whole opportunity piece and how important that is in the transaction. Now, this could be worse than this, right? Think about this for just a minute. What if I had 18% credit card debt? What is my net cost of money until that credit card debt's gone? It really is 18% net
18%.
because every dollar I'm sending to taxes could have gone to that debt.
Mhm.
Right? Now, to do that over a lifetime, I think that's a little excessive, but understanding that idea. So that was C, measure both opportunity cost and the opportunity gain, not just the gain at a reasonable net cost of money. So next, D is use the actual internal rate of return over time, not the misleading averages that we hear in the marketplace. And I don't think it's hard to really grasp what some of the differentials are here. And so, Patrick, I'll need you to actually show me the.
Do you have your TC open?
Oh, you know it. What am I looking at here?
So what I need now is the market history.
Patrick gets to be Vanna White.
And let's put in 40 years in the upper left. So we'll look at the last 40 years. And what we see in the S&P over the last 40 years is 13.09%. Now, we've got a lot of things in here that could be part of what's going on there. We clearly have the capability that we've talked about in earlier webinars about, the certainty aspect usually, or portion of the fund like bonds or other pieces. But let's just focus on this right now. And now if we get a future value calculator, and this is what's in people's head for the most part. So we put $100,000 in there for 40 years at 13.09% that we see in the S&P over this 40-year time frame, and everybody thinks this is what ought to happen to them. And we see $13,707,000. But what we know is, yeah, that's the average of the time frame, but we had ups and downs along there. Does that make a difference? Well, let's see. And just a quick, short way we can do this without a lot of complication. And why don't you make this top and just slide it over a little bit or down a little bit? Just slide that calculator down a little, just so we can see the top of that column. All right. And so now let's put $1 up there in present value. We could put any amount, and what it'll do is it'll calculate the actual rate of return based on just a lump sum going in. And what it shows us is 11.7%. And let's get another future value calculator. So if you just go to new there. So that's 1.39% difference. Okay, big deal. I can live with that, right? Well, let's see what $100,000 at 11.7 over 40 years looks like. 8.3 million. We lost $5 million, over $5 million. We lost more than a third of the account with a 1.39% drop. Those differences are massive when we look at it from a standpoint of numbers. Questions? What?
the size of this thing. It's like killing me.
If you want to put this one the same, raise it up.
Now,
to
could
the
you put
bottom
on
of
this
that and then pull the
calculator a
bottom to the
button?
same height, and it'll automatically.
Go ahead and
Get
ask
the width.
Jeffrey. Yeah.
Would it be something that you do in the future, put a button on here to underneath to somehow inculcate a value underneath the interest rates? Like what $1 would be worth or 100,000, whatever you put in present value? Because when I first started using this, I'm like, oh, I had $100,000 in present value. Where's it show what it's worth at the end of the 40 years? But it doesn't on this calculator. I'd have to do it here.
It doesn't. So you would like to see that somewhere?
Well, I don't know. Would that
We can
be
look at it. Would
a
it be
reasonable
helpful?
thing for me to want?
Define reasonable.
Yeah. Yeah,
Well, come
probably.
on. It depends if you're talking to a 4-year-old or your neighbor, right? What's reasonable?
Right. Yeah. So it could be helpful. Let me think about where we could put it, maybe up across the top somewhere and just put what the value is when you put it in there. Maybe so. Let's see what the impact would be based on putting in annual dollars instead of just money up front. Does that make sense? So we're just going to change the present value and we'll put $1 in payment and do the same thing. We'll get two future value calculators and compare them. And what's interesting is look at what the change is. Rather than 11.7, if we do annually, it's 10.9. It's 10.9. Why is the return less when we're doing dollar cost averaging? That was supposed to fix everything, right? That was the big fix in the market. Oh, you're in for the long haul. You do dollar cost averaging. That fixes those up and downs. Well, looks to me like it made the rate of return worse. And it does. Because there's more money in for the downs to experience. So
Well, that's
if we
like
look at the
that's like a guy came and he's looking at 40,000 he put in his deferred comp and he says it's worth 60,000 now. But when I forget what interest rate he told me he got, but I said, well, you didn't put that whole 40,000 in 25 years ago. You know, you put like $10
Right.
in and then 50 and then 100, and it makes a big difference in the return that you have. So you can't calculate. He just divided subtracted and divided the difference.
Right. What is that? That goes back to standard number A,
Yep.
right? You can't use regular grade school math when figuring this out. And what happens exactly and what you're talking about, Jeffrey, is how much money is in there when the ups happen, how much money is in there when the downs happen. And it's just the sequencing of returns has a bigger impact on dollar cost averaging than it does on lump sum dollars. It's actually the sequencing of returns is kind of an interesting thing. I don't know if we want to look at that this time, but we can come back to it. With lump sum dollars, sequencing return doesn't matter. It doesn't matter where the negatives and positives are. The result is exactly the same. However, when you're putting annual dollars in there, it drastically changes what the difference is. And look at this here. So before we saw that we lost a third of the account, a little over a third. Here we lost almost half the account with that differential between the actual
39% before, 39 versus 45.
39 versus 45. Okay.
Yep.
So closer than what I thought, but
Still
quite a bit. Right?
$3 million.
Pretty crazy. Questions on that? And why that's important?
Hey, Patrick,
Yeah.
will you do me a favor and pull up another rate calculator and put the present value at 10.9 and the future value at 13.09, 10.9, 10.9%.
Oh. What are you asking?
So put in
present value
10.9,
10.9%.
Okay.
present value of 10.9, and then on the future value,
13.09,
13.07.
Okay.
and then 1 year.
1 year. Yeah. This is my favorite thing to do.
Yeah, I use that all the time. So if we've taught them 1980s, 1990s, and today to look at the difference in interest rates, they think, it's a couple of percent difference, but it's really 20% difference between those two numbers.
Yep.
20% on an annual basis, which in this case worked out to like 40% of the account over the 40
That's
years.
exactly right. Yeah. Yep.
Yep. Massive. And yet most people would look at that and say, 13.9, 10 point. or 13.09, 10.9, a couple points difference, going to make a big difference. Oh yeah, how about half the account? And so when we don't take that next step because of that exponential impact of 40 years in there, it's totally misleading as to what the differential is between those two. And it goes back to, again, being grade school math versus financial exponential math, right?
When they see the difference between those numbers being 20% difference, they're like, oh, wow, that's why it's almost half the amount.
Right. Right. Now it makes sense. Thanks, Michael.
Then you add in fees and taxes. And
Oh yeah, fees, taxes, and a certainty account that's only earning 4% in bonds or something like that, rather than getting the credit of the whole thing, right? Yeah, big difference. Okay.
All right.
Todd.
Letter D.
Yes.
I want to ask a question, and
Yep.
one of the biggest things that I remember in the past we always see is you see a case and they say, well, it's earning 6%, but after tax it's 4%. How would be the best way for you to show that to somebody? Because interest rates are exponential, and the further out we go, the further they're spread apart. So they're not equal. You can't say 4 is the same as 6% over a long period of time.
Well, if it's static, it is. If it fluctuates, you can't. But if it is a static 6, then that is. So in other words, if the earnings of, let's get some, let's go bigger just so we can understand it a little better. So 10% in a 30% tax bracket is the same as 7% with no tax, and the results will be the same
In 1 year, but over time.
Over time.
All the way out, it'll be the same. And then ideally with cash flow, if you really want to see the two graphs together, then you use the side-by-side tool and have cash flow in one showing one and one in the other, and you have both those lines, and it shows clearly what the differential is, which I don't think we're going to have time for that.
Nope, but that's a good. Katie, will you make a note of that to show side by side next month? Again, we've showed it before. So Tom, if you feel like you want to go back and find that. Specifically side by side.
I'll work it out, but now I know where the graph is, just in my mind, because I don't see people every day anymore, so sometimes it's harder to remember where something was.
So you're talking about comparing two cash flows and then, run a duplicate cash flow and then use a side by side to graph it out.
Right.
Yeah, that's a great way to do it. And so go to here just to kind of look at what the difference is. If you put in present value of $100,000, is that what you were saying, Tom, for 30 years?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, 100 grand.
Right. And then put in 6% as the earnings. All right. And what we see over there is $574,000. Now, if we duplicate this, so just go up to the gear and select duplicate just to shortcut what we have to do. Now we just change this to 4. On our earnings.
A lot going on.
Yeah, it's doing a lot.
Running to Texas and back.
Whoops. What happened here?
I don't know.
I think you clicked the present value button on the left side.
Oh, you did.
On the
Thanks. Yep. Click on present value up there. You see the button?
Nice
for
catch,
present value.
Elijah,
didn't
thank
want
you.
that.
Oh, you don't want it?
No, turn off. What I'm saying is the button beside it.
Oh.
It's doing a calculate. Yeah, you had it. So go back.
Oh, you're talking
All
about
right,
the one
now
I
you're good.
duplicated.
Yeah, it's the one you duplicated.
All right. Well, I
You got rid of it?
got rid of it.
Okay.
So.
We have to wait for it to finish.
Yeah,
Yeah, luckily, everybody's following this very closely.
All right. Got it.
Okay, now put 4% on this one. Okay, so the differential there is more than just that 30% decrease, right? I mean, that's what we're seeing is the amount in the future. You can't, that differential between the 6 and 4 doesn't carry all the way out because it's that differential every single year. And so the impact over time is bigger. But if we go ahead and go to tools, we'll just do this quickly since we're here already anyway. If we go to tools and side by side.
Yep. Oh, sorry. Gosh, where did all this come from?
But you have other people inside your computer like I do, huh?
And then on option A, let's put in cash flow 1. So click where it says option A.
Put your years to illustrate
yeah.
in first.
Yeah, you got to have the years, sorry. Oh, and we need We have to have ages in there too. Sorry.
I only know because I've made this mistake before.
This is a good one to bring up. Actually, if you put them both at one, it's fine. But yeah. Okay. And so we have this on this one. Now go option B. Cash flow 2. And now then look at the graph. Upper right. Oh, no, of the side by side.
Right above the dark blue box.
Sorry. Right here.
Yep. Nope.
Nope.
The other one.
Here?
Yep.
There we go.
There. That's what you're looking for, Tom?
Yep. Yep.
Wow. Yeah, that is a big difference.
I mean, I've only run into this a few times, but once in a while I'll get somebody, well, my advisor told me that 6 was as good as, or 4 was as good as 6, before tax and after tax. And over time it is not.
No. And you can put market history in here too to do side by side.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just gets bigger.
Same
more.
idea.
Yep.
Thank you.
More
Thank you.
wigglies.
Thank you.
Consider the ripple effects of every financial decision. Nothing acts in a vacuum. This we see in the marketplace all the time. It's amazing how many of these are kind of tied together as well. And this really plays on B, which was always compare strategies using equivalent cash flows. Because understand that every financial decision, we live in a finite world when it comes to our finances. Financial decision means it's going to impact something else, right? We can't just, oh, I'm just going to add an extra 10,000 to this. No, that's only if I stop putting it somewhere else. Okay. So we have to look at all those ripples and what they entail. It might be that having more money in this account, and we see that heavily when we use asset flow. When we pull money out of an account, sometimes it means we can pull even more money out because it actually reduces the amount of tax we pay because we have less money in there earning interest, which is taxable. And so everything impacts everything else. And we need to understand all of those ripples, which it is interesting what we see. People ignore the ripples when they're talking about market assets. They typically don't think about the taxes, the fees, any of the other things that they've had to do, have the certainty account. And then they ignore the positive ripples of life insurance, like the waiver of premium, the death benefit, the unlocking of strategies in the future, the cash flow bridge opportunities, all those other things that are the ripples of the positive life insurance. So the comparison is always getting rid of the negative ripples on what we're comparing against and get rid of the positive ripples on the life insurance. Right? Okay. But a lot of times that is because the focus starts on the cash of the life insurance instead of what its real impact is and what it was designed to do.
But it's also the other side of the balance sheet, which is liabilities as well.
Yeah,
You're paying
absolutely.
paying interest to somebody else, but let's say you pay off that debt. I mean, that's obviously opportunity cost as well. So yeah, it feels like the typical financial services always being myopic, right? They're focusing on just one certain aspect and don't take everything into consideration.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, number F. Okay, avoid paltering. Don't let true but irrelevant facts lead to false conclusions. Paltering is a big one in the industry. What in the world does paltering mean?
Politics, just think politics.
Politics and paltering are kind of similar. Let's go to look at the definition from Wikipedia for a minute. So paltering is the active use of selected truthful, and that's important, statements to mislead. So they're telling the truth, it's just misleading.
Insincere.
Well, it's not that it's necessary. Yeah. Oh, it does say insincerity, but we all do it.
It's intentional insincerity.
We all do it. It's intentional. Go ahead and hit your next. It's considered both more serious and more common than a lie of omission, just leaving facts out. This is different than that. And hit it again.
You spelled Langford wrong right there.
What's that?
Todd Rogers. Todd Langford.
Politicians, this is what you were talking about, sometimes use or sometimes palter to dodge questions and debate. So think about it. They're asked a question of something they've done in a certain area. They know that it's not going to be received well. So they say, look at the great thing we did with something totally unrelated, right? And everybody's satisfied that they answered the question. They didn't answer the question, right? They just diverted to something else that was truthful. They didn't necessarily tell a lie, but they didn't answer the question. And it's also used, and this is where I've seen it, heavily with magicians. That's one of the psychological tricks. So magicians use psychology quite a bit. And so this is one of those 6 majors that psychologists use, and we all use it. I love this in the middle. This is a great example. You know, somebody says, "Hey, how do you like my new outfit?" And it's something you think looks awful. Are you going to say that to your friend? That looks terrible. Or are you going to try to avoid that question by saying something like, "Wow, you're so creative"? Okay, are they creative? Probably. So you told them the truth. What did they hear though? They interpret, if you hit it again, the remark as you condoning it. You liked my outfit by saying that, right? That's not what you said. So we do it to be nice as well. Next. Psychologists call it paltering, or the art of deceiving by saying things are true but intentionally misleading. And it's the intentional part. And the next one, it's rare that a magician straight up lies to you, but they encourage you to lie to yourself through your assumptions. It's really a tool that's used quite a bit in the financial industry. Think about it, you know, those that have been through truth training, we talk about, Kim brought it up earlier about the mortgages and what the cost of a mortgage is, and adding up cumulative interest with no opportunity on it over time and comparing those 2 things together. That's pure paltering, right? It's bringing interest rates, which is total, or cumulative interest, which is true, but a totally unrelated, unuseful piece of information to sway people's decision on which is the best option.
Like sleight of hand.
It's very close. Yeah.
Mm.
I remember I'd heard it was considered one of the best marketing campaigns back in the turn of the century. And the tuna industry was trying to market tuna, and salmon industry was huge. Everybody was, you know, salmon was the big thing. And so they put out a slogan that says, "Doesn't turn pink in the can." Right?
Yep.
Tuna doesn't turn pink in the can. Well, neither does salmon, but think about how they had to explain that. Well, salmon started that, you know, whatever. It takes a whole.
Have you ever heard Chilean sea bass? You know, Chilean sea bass they serve in restaurants. The actual term is like the Pacific toothfish or something like that.
But nobody would eat it.
Nobody would eat it.
There
Exactly.
you go. All right, next. So
You've got a little more work on your, oh, maybe not. Okay.
standard G. Oh, it's up there. I was looking at the wrong one. Accurate strategies require both accurate math and correct formulas. I mean, that seems like obvious, right? But it is not. It's one thing to have accurate math, but it's completely different if the formula is wrong, right? We see that all the time where there's accurate math and wrong formulas. Go ahead and bring this one up. This is off of a website about debt payment, directly off of their website. And the most important metric to understand for your loan is what's called actual cost of funds. It's a relationship between the amount of money you finance and the total amount you pay in interest. So they had to do an example with a 30-year conventional mortgage at 3%. So here's what they say. So you finance $300,000 at 3% for 30 years. Your actual cost of funds would be $155,000 of interest paid. And then if you hit this, what you see there is $155,000, the amount of interest, divided by the principal of $300,000 is 51% is your actual cost of funds or your effective interest rate. The math is right, is it not?
Mm-hmm.
Is the math right?
That you just did? Yes.
Yeah. Is the formula right? No. Sure. This is the formula for effective annual interest rate. It's nothing close to what they put there. Sorry. What did they leave out? In the number of periods. This is over time, and they didn't include it. So their math was right, but the formula was wrong. This also, we see tons of this in the financial industry. Okay? So those are number A through G of Truth Concept Standard, which I hope that you will adopt and believe and trust and accept and all those
I think you were
things.
just paltering. You just said
Oh,
number
well,
A
maybe so.
through G.
I would encourage you to grab a screen clip or use your phone and take a picture or what have you, and really put some thought into this and identify for yourself what is at not only your mind, but your heart as it relates to all of these. Because I know I've been completely guilty of at least 2 or 3 of these in my past when I didn't know any better, you know, with all the goodness that I was trying to bring to the table, but I didn't understand what I was talking about. And so I had to go back to clients and say, what I told you was wrong.
And I think that's the biggest issue, what you're talking about. If you don't agree with the standards, what's that phone call going to sound like 30 years from now when a client says, hey, this one you were close to what you were talking about. What was that math you were using, or what would, whatever else?
It's the compound effect. It happens positively and negatively.